Why is that burden here? We don't have space. The words hit me like a slap, sharp and merciless, echoing across the wide glass windows of the lake house I had worked 3 decades to buy. My daughter-in-law's voice carried through the hall with a venom I had never heard spoken so openly before, not toward me, not in front of others. I froze at the threshold, suitcase still in my hand, as all heads turned toward me. There I was, Lorraine Mitchell, 58 years old, a retired nurse who had cared for strangers in hospital wards until my back ached and my hands stiffened. And in this moment, I was not a mother, not a widow, not even a guest. I was being treated like an intruder inside my own home. The house wasn't grand by millionaire standards, but it was my pride, a cedar-framed lakefront retreat with wraparound decks overlooking Michigan waters that shimmered like liquid silver at sunset. I had bought it alone, after my husband passed and my son Daniel had left for college. Every paycheck, every extra shift at the ER, every overnight duty in the trauma unit had carved out the down payment. This house was my sanctuary. But right now, it looked nothing like the quiet refuge I cherished. Music boomed from a speaker in the living room. Laughter rang out, too loud and careless, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. I spotted unfamiliar coats tossed carelessly over the banister, and then faces. Not family, strangers. Sophie's cousins, her sisters, her mother, even her nephew's faces I knew only through Facebook photos were sprawled out on my couches, eating chips from my bowls, drinking wine from glasses I had bought with my first overtime bonus. And Sophie, my son's polished, picture-perfect wife stood in the center of it all like a hostess, chin lifted high, wearing the silk robe I kept folded in the cedar chest of the master bedroom. My robe. She smirked at me. Well, did you hear me? Lorraine, we don't have room for you here. You should have called before coming. A silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Even the music seemed to dim in that second. Every pair of eyes followed the scene like it was Theater Sophie, center stage, and me, humiliated in my own doorway. My fingers trembled against the handle of my suitcase. I wanted to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. My son, my only child, was nowhere to be seen. If he had been there, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe Sophie wouldn't have dared, or maybe he had allowed it. The thought sank into me like ice water. I forced myself to step inside, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors I had personally chosen for their honey color, the ones that reminded me of summer light. But my steps didn't feel like my own. Each inch of that floor now belonged to someone else, or so they wanted me to believe. Sophie crossed her arms, a triumphant gesture. You should understand, Lorraine. We've filled every room. My family needed this space. You know, for once, this house actually has people in it. Joy. Life. Not just empty silence. Her mother let out a little laugh, one of those rehearsed chuckles meant to wound. So this is the famous lake house, huh? Smaller than I imagined. I clenched my jaw. Smaller than imagined. It had taken me 30 years to imagine and then create it. Every wall painted by my own hand, every curtain stitched at midnight on my old Singer machine, every lamp chosen when money was tight, but my dreams were not. I tried to hold my voice steady. This house is mine. I come here every summer, every holiday weekend, for 20 years. I don't know what Daniel told you, but oh. Daniel Sophie cut me off, her lips curling. Daniel said we could use it. He told me, Mom doesn't need it like we do. He said it was just sitting here, waiting to be enjoyed. So that's what we're doing. Enjoying. You wouldn't want to stand in the way of family enjoying themselves? Would you? My breath caught. Daniel said that my Daniel, the boy I raised alone after his father's heart gave out, the man I supported through medical school loans, the sun I gave every piece of my tired body to lift higher. I couldn't believe it. Or maybe I didn't want to believe it. The room swirled with whispers. Someone muttered. She looks confused, and laughter followed. Heat rose in my chest, hot and humiliating. I had walked into this house expecting peace, expecting the sound of waves lapping against the dock, maybe a glass of iced tea on the porch while I read one of my husband's old books. Instead, I was surrounded by strangers who saw me not as the owner, not as the matriarch, but as a burden. "Where's Daniel?" I demanded finally, the tremor in my voice betraying me. "At work," Sophie said smoothly, already bored of me. "Unlike you, he has responsibilities. You should go back to the city. Lorraine, there's no place for you here." She turned away before I could answer, lifting her phone, laughing into it as if I had already been dismissed from existence. The conversation around me swelled backup jokes, clinks of glasses, the shuffle of cards on my coffee table, and there I stood, invisible in my own home, my suitcase still unopened. I smiled, though my lips ached. I smiled because I refused to give them what they wanted, a scene, a breakdown, proof that I was weak. They thought they had won. They thought I would bow my head and walk away quietly. But they didn't know me. They didn't know the nights I had spent on the hospital floor, holding dying strangers' hands. They didn't know the years of sacrifice, the pennies stretched, the exhaustion swallowed so Daniel could have a chance at life. They didn't know the kind of steel it took to survive as a Black woman in a world that wanted me tired and silent. They didn't know Lorraine Mitchell. And they had no idea what I was capable of when someone tried to take what was mine. I set my suitcase down slowly, deliberately, and looked straight at Sophie, who still wasn't looking back. My voice, when it finally emerged, was calm. Too calm. "I understand the situation perfectly." That made her glance at me, triumphant again, certain I had surrendered. But she didn't see the flicker of something colder behind my eyes, because this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. To understand why those words that burden cut so deeply, you'd have to know who I am and what this house truly means. My name is Lorraine Mitchell, and I turned 58 this spring. On paper, I suppose I look ordinary widowed, one grown son, retired after 30 years as a registered nurse. But every wrinkle on my face, every scar on my hands, every gray hair I've decided not to dye, they all carry stories of survival. I grew up in Detroit, the daughter of a steelworker and a church pianist. We didn't have much, but we had dignity. My mother always said, "If the world won't give you a seat at the table, Lorraine, you bring your own chair." And so I did. At 17, I bought my first pair of scrubs from a thrift shop and entered nursing school on a scholarship, determined to build a life better than the one offered to me. I met Marcus, my husband, during those years. He was studying mechanical engineering, tall and handsome with a laugh that filled every corner of a room. We were young, but we built a partnership that was solid, more solid than the houses we rented, more solid than the cars that broke down under us. Together, we raised our only son, Daniel. When Marcus died suddenly from a heart attack in his early 40s, it was as if the foundation of my life cracked. Daniel was still in college, and I remember thinking, I can't collapse. Not now. He still needs me. So I worked and worked. I pulled double shifts, volunteered for overnight duty, stitched curtains for neighbors just to earn extra cash. Every dollar I saved, I tucked away in a separate account, my freedom fund. Marcus and I had always dreamed of a place by the water, somewhere to escape the noise of the city. So when I finally had enough, I bought this house on Lake Michigan. Cedar wood, wraparound porch, 3 bedrooms, and a view that made every sacrifice worthwhile. For years, it was just me and the lake. I'd spend long weekends gardening, painting walls, hanging curtains I sewed myself. Daniel would come when he could holidays, summers, and we'd sit on the deck eating barbecued chicken, laughing about his childhood. Back then, he still called me Mama. But things changed when he met Sophie. She was beautiful, no doubt, polished, with long hair always perfectly styled, manicured nails, and a smile that could disarm even the toughest critic. She worked in marketing when they first dated, but after marrying Daniel, she left her job. I never questioned why Daniel was doing well as a physician's assistant, and perhaps they had agreed on that arrangement. At first, she was sweet, almost too sweet. She'd show up with flowers from the farmer's market, bottles of wine, even offer to wash the dishes after dinner. Once, when my back hurt, she insisted, "Lorraine, sit down. Let me massage your shoulders." I wanted to believe it was kindness, but then I caught the flickers. The way her eyes scanned the house like she was calculating square footage, the way her compliments always had hooks. This place is so beautiful. It's almost wasted sitting empty most of the year. I wanted to believe she respected what this home stood for, but slowly, the cracks began to show. She started with comments. Subtle at first. "Lorraine, don't you think you should rest more? At your age, carrying heavy things can be dangerous." Or, "That sofa is lovely, but maybe something more modern would suit the place," always with a smile, always wrapped in a tone of concern. And then came the bigger hints. "This house must get so lonely when you're not here. Don't you think it's a shame it sits empty most of the year?" I brushed it off, telling myself she was just making conversation. I didn't want to believe she could see my sanctuary as wasted space. But as months turned into years, the comments grew sharper, the looks colder. And Daniel. My Daniel never said a word. Still, I tried. I invited them for holidays, cooked meals, set the table with the china I'd saved for decades to collect. I wanted them to feel welcome, to build memories here the way Marcus and I had once dreamed. Yet even then, I felt a distance. Sophie never really looked at me when we spoke. She always seemed to be evaluating me, like a critic judging a performance. And Daniel, my once chatty, affectionate son, seemed quieter around me, as though he was caught between two worlds. I didn't push. I told myself he was building his own family now, that this was the natural course of life. Mothers raise sons to let them go. But hearing Sophie call me a burden in front of her family, in the house I built from sweat and sacrifice, was something else entirely. The humiliation seared into me, but beneath it was something far more dangerous clarity. This wasn't just about one rude comment. This was a window into how Sophie really saw me unnecessary, inconvenient, disposable. And if Daniel was silent, then maybe, just maybe, he saw me the same way. I looked around that crowded living room, the children running across my rugs, leaving cookie crumbs. Sophie's cousins sprawled across my couches, feet on the coffee table Marcus and I had bought together. Sophie herself, sipping wine from my late husband's favorite glass, acting as if she owned it all. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that while this house was my refuge, it was also my Achilles heel. If Sophie wanted it badly enough, if Daniel allowed it, I could lose everything I had built. A burden, she had called me. But I was not a burden. I was the backbone. The reason Daniel had the education, the home, the life he enjoyed. I was the one who had fought against a world stacked against me, and won. And if Sophie thought she could erase that with a single insult, she was about to learn who Lorraine Mitchell truly was. As the evening wore on and laughter drowned me out, I sat quietly in the corner, watching, memorizing, Every careless word, every arrogant smirk, every little clue that would later become important. They thought I was finished. But in truth, I was only beginning. The morning after Sophie's cruel words, I woke up in the guest room, the only room no one had claimed, and even then only because it was the smallest, tucked away in the corner of the house. My suitcase sat unopened beside the bed. I stared at it in the early dawn light filtering through the blinds, wondering how long it would take before someone told me to move even from this small corner. I could have left. I could have driven back to Detroit, curled up in my apartment, and licked my wounds in silence. But something inside me wouldn't let me. Call it stubbornness. Call it instinct after decades in the hospital. I'd learned to trust my gut, and my gut was telling me something was deeply wrong. I padded down the hallway in slippers, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet. That sound used to comfort me, proof that the house was alive, breathing. But now it sounded like a warning. In the kitchen, Sophie's mother was already awake, clattering pans like she was in her own home. She didn't greet me, didn't even look up, just muttered something about needing more eggs. I quietly poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot I had bought years ago, the one Marcus and I used every Sunday morning. The smell was familiar, but it didn't taste the same. Nothing tasted the same anymore. As I sipped, my eyes drifted to the counter. A thick envelope sat there, addressed not to me but to my son, Daniel. My heart gave a small jolt. Mail for Daniel, or why would it be delivered to my lake house instead of his own home in the city? The return address caught my eye, a contractor's company in Muskegon. My mind scrambled. Contractor, I hadn't hired anyone recently. With a casual motion, I slid the envelope just enough to see the contents. Blueprints, estimates, renovation plans. My breath hitched. The plans showed extensions to the house, an extra deck, a remodeled kitchen, even a new master suite. The total cost over $60,000, and in the top corner, bold letters read, Project Mitchell Residence, client Daniel Mitchell. Daniel, not me. I quickly slid the papers back into the envelope before anyone noticed. My chest tightened, my mind racing. Why would Daniel be commissioning renovations on a house that wasn't his? That was the first sign. The second came that evening. I had retreated to the deck for some air, the lake shimmering with the last light of sunset. The laughter inside grated on me, so I welcomed the solitude. That's when I heard it. Sophie's voice, drifting through the half-open sliding door as she spoke on her phone. Yes, no, she doesn't know yet. Once the papers are ready, it'll be impossible for her to stop us. My pulse quickened. Papers, stop us. I leaned closer, careful not to make a sound. She won't even understand what's happening until it's done, Sophie continued, her tone sharp, confident. Daniel just needs to sign. And then it's ours. The house, the land, all of it. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. She laughed softly, a laugh that sent a chill through me. No, she's too sentimental to fight. She'll fold. She always does. My hands clenched around the wooden railing of the deck, splinters pressing into my palms. Too sentimental to fight. That's what she thought of me. That was the second sign. The third came 2 days later. Sophie had taken her family shopping in town, leaving me blessedly alone in my own home for the first time since arriving. I decided to use the time to breathe, to reclaim at least a piece of my space. But as I walked into the study, a room I rarely let others enter, I stopped dead in my tracks. The desk drawers were ajar, papers shuffled, folders out of place. My stomach dropped. I always kept this room immaculate. I knew where every document, every receipt, every photograph was stored. Now, the order had been disturbed. I sifted through the mess with trembling fingers. Bank statements, utility bills, and then tucked under a pile. Something that didn't belong a copy of my husband's old life insurance policy, only it had been altered. The beneficiary's name, mine, had been crossed out in pen, replaced with Daniel's. My heart pounded in my ears. Someone had been tampering with my most private records. I sank into the desk chair, the weight of realization pressing down on me. These weren't accidents. This wasn't just Sophie being rude or careless. There was a pattern. Signs stacking one after the other, each pointing to a scheme bigger than I could have imagined. Blueprints for renovations I never approved, phone calls about papers and taking the house, tampered documents hidden in my study. Something was happening behind my back, something dangerous. That evening, I sat on the deck with the lake stretching endlessly before me, its calm surface belying the storm inside me. I thought of Marcus, of how he used to say, "Lorraine, you've got the sharpest instincts of anyone I know. You see the truth before others even catch a glimpse of it." Well, I was seeing it now. I was seeing that my son and his wife were not just treating me as a burden. They were preparing something that would strip me of the very sanctuary I had bled and wept to create. But if they thought I was blind, they were wrong. I may have been quiet, but I was watching. I was listening. And I was waiting. Because when people underestimate you, they make mistakes. And mistakes leave trails. The lake rippled under the fading light, as if whispering back a promise this story wasn't finished. Not yet. I've always believed that suspicion without proof is like smoke without fire. It stings your eyes. But people can wave it away as imagination. To confront someone, you need more than instinct. You need evidence. And evidence, I would soon learn, was everywhere. It was late on a Tuesday when I found it. Sophie had taken her family out for a boat ride on the lake. Their laughter carried across the water as the motor roared away. I watched from the deck until they disappeared around the bend, then slipped inside. My heart pounded not from fear, but from determination. I had spent 3 decades in hospitals. I knew how to search a room quietly, how to notice the details others overlooked. Nurses are detectives in scrubs. We read charts, faces, and silences. And now, I would use those same instincts to protect myself. I started in the master bedroom. My bedroom. The room where Marcus and I once spent summer nights listening to the waves crash against the shore. But now it smelled of Sophie's perfume suite, cloying, somehow invasive. Clothes not mine hung in the closet, my dresses shoved to the side. My jewelry box sat open on the dresser, its contents rearranged. But it wasn't until I opened the nightstand drawer that I found the first undeniable proof. Inside, tucked between Sophie's magazines, was a folder marked with Daniel's handwriting. My pulse quickened as I pulled it out and opened it. Legal documents, property transfer requests. I scanned the pages, my eyes moving faster with every line. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear paperwork to transfer ownership of the lake house from me to Daniel. My breath caught at the justification typed neatly in the header. Owner is advanced in age and requires family oversight for property management. Advanced in age requires oversight. As though I were some frail, confused woman incapable of paying bills or unlocking her own front door. And tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. There was more. Attached to the file was a draft of a medical statement unsigned, but prepared, suggesting early cognitive decline and recommending Daniel take over all financial and property decisions. My body went cold. I'd spent my entire career fighting to keep my mind sharp. Crosswords in the break room, medical journals after long shifts, mentoring young nurses. My mind was my strongest muscle, and now my own son and his wife were plotting to turn it into my greatest weakness. I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the papers in my lap. This was no misunderstanding. This was no exaggeration of Sophie's temper. This was a plan, a cold, Deliberate plan to strip me of everything I had built. But there was more to uncover. I knew it. I moved to the study, my sanctuary of order. There, hidden beneath a stack of gardening magazines, I found an envelope with Daniel's name again. Inside was a real estate appraisal my lake house valued at nearly $400,000, scrawled in Sophie's handwriting across the bottom, enough for down payment on new house, plus private school tuition. I stared at the words until the ink blurred. My sanctuary wasn't just a home to them. It was currency. The betrayal was layered now. Sophie's cruelty was no longer just rudeness. Daniel's silence was no longer just passivity. They were partners in this, weaving lies around me, preparing to snatch the very heart of my life. But what sealed it wasn't the documents or the appraisal. It was something smaller, something so careless. It proved arrogance had already taken root. In the back of the envelope, I found a handwritten note, not to me, not even to Daniel. A note from Sophie to herself, like a reminder. Once Lorraine signs, get copies to lawyer. No delay. Don't let her stall. Keep her calm until after. I read it twice, then 3 times. Each time, the words cut deeper. She wasn't just planning this theft, she was preparing to manipulate me into agreeing. Smiles, sweet words, little distractions, keeping me calm. The humiliation mixed with rage inside me, but I didn't crumble. No. My tears dried before they could fall. I folded the papers carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked it under my arm. For years, I had told Daniel that life rewards preparation, that you don't wait until a storm comes to fix the roof, you fortify it in advance. Well, the storm was here, and I would not be caught unprepared. I sat at the desk, turned on the small lamp, and took out my old leather-bound notebook, page by page. I began recording everything: dates, overheard words, suspicious documents, every detail I could remember. I wrote down. Nurses are meticulous record keepers. We charted every medication, every symptom, every reaction. And now I was charting my own case. By the time Sophie's boat returned, I had slipped everything back into place, my notebook hidden in my suitcase. I stood at the window, watching them laugh as they hauled coolers up the dock. They looked carefree, victorious, as if the house already belonged to them. But I had something they didn't proof. The first piece of evidence was in my hands, and I knew more would come. They thought they were weaving a perfect net, but in their arrogance, they were leaving holes. Holes I would widen until the whole thing unraveled. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. The papers played in my mind like a reel. Advanced in age, cognitive decline, private school tuition. I could hear Sophie's voice by the time she figures it out. It'll be too late. But it wasn't too late. Not by a long shot. Because Lorraine Mitchell had just moved from suspicion to certainty. And once you have certainty, you can begin to fight. Once I had those papers in my hands, I knew I couldn't afford to stay passive. Suspicion had become proof, and proof demanded action. The nurse in me, the one who had survived 3 decades in emergency rooms, came alive again. When you see signs of a stroke, you don't wait. You document. You act. You save the patient. Well, now the patient was my future, and I wasn't about to let it die on Sophie's watch. The first step was observation. I bought a small notebook at the drugstore in town, just an ordinary lined journal with a plain blue cover. To anyone else, it looked unimportant, but to me, it was a case file. I titled the first page Lake House Timeline and began logging everything. Saturday, 8:45 p.m. Overheard Sophie on phone. Once the papers are ready, she won't be able to stop us. Monday, 2:10 p.m. Found contractor envelope with Daniel's name. Tuesday, 9:30 m. Discovered altered insurance copy. plus property transfer draft. Every word, every date, every shred of evidence went into that book. The second step was technology. I wasn't naive. I knew Sophie and Daniel wouldn't stop at paperwork. They'd leave digital trails done too. So I quietly set up a few of my own. I had an old nanny cam, disguised as a digital clock, tucked in the back of my closet. I placed it in the study, angled toward the desk where the documents had been disturbed. If they came back to tamper again, I'd have them on record. Then I set up a voice recorder app on my phone, always ready in my pocket. Sophie had a habit of speaking carelessly when she thought no one was listening. If she slipped, I would capture it. The third step was legal armor. I called an old colleague from the hospital, a nurse I had trained years ago who now worked at a clinic downtown. "Tanya," I said, lowering my voice, "I need a favor. Do you know any doctors who can provide a thorough mental competency exam?" There was a pause. "Lorraine, are you all right? I'm fine," I assured her. "But my family is trying to say otherwise. By the end of the week, I had an appointment set with a licensed psychiatrist, one who specialized in elder care evaluations. If Sophie wanted to claim I was losing my mind, I'd have the papers to prove otherwise. But as I built my defense, the atmosphere inside the house grew unbearable. Sophie's family treated me like a shadow, a piece of outdated furniture no one had the courage to throw away. They left dirty dishes in the sink, stomped across the hardwood floors with muddy shoes, and laughed about how quaint the house was, like they were mocking it while stripping it of dignity. One afternoon, I caught Sophie's cousin scrolling through real estate listings on her tablet. "Imagine what we could do with the money from this place," she whispered to her sister, not realizing I was in earshot. Money. That's all it was to them. Not a lifetime of sacrifice. Not a sanctuary of memory. Just dollar signs. The tension finally boiled over one evening at dinner. Sophie had cooked, if you could call it that, and we all sat at the long oak table I had refinished myself years ago. My mother's china, which I only ever used on Christmas, was now hosting half-eaten spaghetti and spilled soda. Sophie raised her glass of wine. "To new beginnings," she declared with a smirk, her eyes darting toward me. I set down my fork. "New beginnings. Yes," she said casually. "Daniel and I have been talking. We think it's time this house becomes more than just your weekend getaway. It should be a family hub. Somewhere for our children to grow. For my family to gather. A place alive with people. Not just empty silence." Her words were almost identical to what she'd spat at me days before. Only this time. She said them with a smile, as though wrapping poison in sugar. Daniel, sitting across from me, kept his head down, fiddling with his fork. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend himself. He just let her speak, as if silence could wash his hands clean. I leaned forward, meeting Sophie's eyes. This house already is alive with the memories I built here? Memories your family has no part in. The room fell silent. Her mother frowned. Sophie's lips curled into that practiced smile, the one that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Lorraine, you're too sentimental. It's just a house, just a house." Marcus's voice echoed in my memory. "This place will be our legacy." Lorraine. I wanted to scream, to pound the table, to demand Daniel look at me and remember who I was, but I didn't. I swallowed the fire and turned it into steel. "Excuse me," I said softly, rising from the table. "I need some air." That night, I reviewed the footage from the nanny cam, and there it was. Sophie rifling through my study again, pulling out documents, snapping photos with her phone, whispering to someone on speaker. "The appraisal says 400. That's enough for the down payment. And then some. Don't worry. Daniel's too soft to resist me. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him." My hands shook, but not from fear, from triumph. The evidence was stacking up, brick by brick. I wasn't just paranoid. I wasn't just sentimental. I was right. But evidence without strategy is like a loaded gun with no target. I couldn't fire yet. Not until I had enough to end this once and for all. And so, while Sophie and her family laughed, drank, and treated my home like a vacation rental, I watched. I documented. I prepared. Because when the time came to confront them, I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to raise the truth. In every fight, there's a moment when the battle lines shift, when what you thought was the whole war turns out to be just the surface. For me, that moment came on a gray Thursday afternoon, the lake covered in mist like a veil hiding what was to come. I was in town, sitting at the corner table of a coffee shop I used to visit on my days off. It had always been my quiet refuge, a place where no one knew me as a widow, a mother, or a burden, just a woman enjoying her latte and a crossword. But that day, I wasn't there for coffee. I was there for information. I'd overheard Sophie on the phone again the night before, whispering in the study while Daniel slept. Yes, the draft looks fine, but we'll need to push the timeline. She's being nosy. No, don't worry, Daniel will do whatever I say. He always does. Her tone was different this time. Softer. Almost intimate. It wasn't how you spoke to a lawyer. Not unless the lawyer was more than just a professional. So I hired a little help. A woman named Clara, who I'd known since my nursing days. Clara had gone into private investigations after retiring from the hospital. She was sharp, discreet, and owed me a favor after I covered for her one too many times during her late shifts. Find out who Sophie's lawyer is. I had told her Chanso and tell me everything. That Thursday, Clara slid into the seat across from me at the cafe, a thin folder in her hand. She didn't waste time. Name's Ethan Reynolds, she said. Family law attorney, mid-40s, divorced. And Lorraine, he's not just her lawyer, he's her boyfriend. The words landed like a punch to the chest. Clara continued, flipping the folder open. Inside were photos, grainy but clear enough. Sophie at a restaurant, leaning across the table, her hand brushing Ethan's. Sophie stepping out of his car at night, their shoulders touching as they laughed. Sophie entering a hotel with him in Chicago, 2 hours from here. On a weekend, she told Daniel she was visiting her mother. My throat went dry. All those smug smiles, all those dismissive words. Sophie wasn't just trying to steal my house. She was cheating on my son while using him as her puppet in her scheme. I gripped the folder, my hands trembling. Are you certain as the sunrise? Clara said. They've been meeting for months. I pulled phone records too. Late night calls almost every night. She's keeping him on the hook and your son in the dark. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of it pressing down. Betrayal layered on betrayal. Sophie wasn't just after money. She was orchestrating an entire double life, one where Daniel was nothing but a pawn. Clara leaned forward. Do you want me to dig deeper? I shook my head. No. I have what I need. Thank you. When Clara left, I sat alone with the folder for a long time. The cafe noise faded, the clinking of cups, the hum of conversation all drowned out by the pounding of my heart. I thought of Daniel, of the boy who once built Lego castles on my kitchen floor, who used to run into my arms when he scraped his knee. He had always been gentle, trusting to a fault. And now that very trust was being weaponized against him. Sophie was building her empire on his silence, his fear of losing her. And Ethan, the lawyer, was helping her draw the blueprint. The first reveal had arrived, and it was uglier than I had ever imagined. That night, I returned to the lake house. The air inside felt heavier, the walls suffocating with secrets. Sophie sat on the couch with her laptop, pretending to be busy with bills. Daniel sat beside her, shoulders hunched, eyes tired. I studied him for a long moment. Did he know? Did some part of him sense the truth, even if he wouldn't admit it? Or was he so desperate to hold on to Sophie that he'd blind himself willingly? I decided not to confront them. Not yet. Confrontation without strategy is just noise, and noise gives your enemy time to regroup. Instead, I slipped quietly into the study, pulled out my notebook, and added the new entry, Thursday, New Wise, 15 Papais. Confirmed Sophie's lawyer is also her romantic partner. Photos was. Phone records obtained. Then I tucked Clara's folder into the false bottom of my suitcase, safe from prying eyes. Later that evening, I overheard Sophie on the phone again. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Once the transfer goes through, we'll be set. Daniel won't question a thing. He never does." Her laugh was soft, almost girlish. A laugh I had never heard directed at my son. I clenched my fists, fury rising in my chest. But alongside the fury was a cold satisfaction. Because now I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting for Daniel's dignity. Even if he didn't realize it yet, the evidence was growing. And with every new piece, Sophie's mask was slipping. She thought she was in control. She thought I was blind. But what she didn't know was that I now held her biggest secret. And when the time came to reveal it, the entire house of cards she had built would collapse in front of everyone. For now, though, I stayed quiet. I played the part of the burden. I let her underestimate me. Because revenge, I've learned, is sweetest when it's served with proof. And Sophie's proof was sitting in my suitcase, waiting for the right moment to burn her entire scheme to ash. The heart can endure a lot, but nothing quite compares to the sting of betrayal. You can suspect it, prepare for it, even steel yourself against it. But when it finally lands, it still feels like a knife twisting where you're most vulnerable. I had told myself I was ready. Ready for Sophie's arrogance, for her affair with Ethan the lawyer, for her attempt to strip me of my house. But the wound I hadn't prepared for was Daniel. My Daniel. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon, the kind where the lake turned steel gray and the whole world seemed restless. Sophie's relatives were scattered around the house, their voices filling every corner, but I noticed Sophie and Daniel slipping into the study. Something about their quiet urgency made me pause in the hallway. I shouldn't have lingered. A good mother would respect privacy. But privacy had been stolen from me long ago, along with every corner of this home. I pressed my ear to the door, my phone recorder already running in my pocket, my pulse thudding. Sophie's voice was sharp, but controlled. "Daniel, the lawyer needs your signature this week. We can't keep putting it off. Your mother's already suspicious." My son's voice was low, hesitant. "I don't know. Sophie, she's not like you say. Mom's still sharp. She catches everything." My heart skipped. He knew I wasn't slipping. He knew. But Sophie cut him off, her tone coated with false sweetness. "That's what the doctor's report is for. Early dementia, mild cognitive decline. The judge won't question it. Ethan already paid the clinic. It's a formality. Daniel, just sign, and it'll all be legal." I gripped the doorframe so tightly my knuckles ached. Early dementia, paid clinic, legal theft dressed up as compassion. Daniel's voice trembled. "It feels wrong. She worked so hard for this house. Without her, I wouldn't even be where I am." Sophie leaned in, her tone dripping with persuasion. "And what about us? Daniel, what about our kids? Do you want them stuck in a cramped apartment forever? You know the medical bills keep piling up. You know the school waiting list won't last forever. This house is the answer." He dragged a hand down his face, torn, whispering, "God, Sophie, she's my mom. Sophie's reply was cold, sharp. She's also standing in the way of our future. Choose Daniel. Her memories, or your children's lives. The pause stretched on forever. Then came the whisper that shattered me. Fine, Daniel said, his voice hollow. I'll sign. I staggered back from the door, pressing a hand to my chest as if I'd been struck. The sound of rain pounding against the porch roof filled the silence, but inside me there was only the echo of those words. I'll sign. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I lay on the narrow guest bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying it over and over. I had braced for Sophie's cruelty. I had prepared for her schemes. But hearing my son, the boy I raised through every fever, every scraped knee, every long night, agree to declare me incompetent for money, that was a different wound altogether. By morning, I knew I had to test him. I found Daniel in the kitchen, still in his t-shirt, pouring cereal for himself while Sophie slept upstairs. He looked exhausted, his hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. For a fleeting second, I saw my little boy again, the one who used to run into my arms after school. My heart ached, wanting to hold him, wanting to shake him. Daniel, I said softly, steadying my voice. Do you believe I'm losing my mind? The spoon froze halfway to the bowl. His head jerked up, eyes wide. Mom, why would you ask that? Because I found the papers. I said simply, no drama, no tears. Just truth. The transfer documents? The medical statement. Don't lie to me. He dropped the spoon. Milk splashed across the counter. You weren't supposed to answer me, I cut in, my tone sharper. Do you believe I'm incompetent? His mouth opened, then closed. He rubbed the back of his neck, the same nervous tell he'd had since childhood whenever he was caught in a lie. His eyes darted to the floor. Finally, he muttered, It's not about you, Mom. It's about us, about my family. My stomach twisted. Your family. What am I? Daniel, what am I, if not your family? He winced, but stayed silent. The silence was worse than shouting, worse than insults. Silence was agreement. Silence was betrayal. Later that day, Sophie breezed into the living room with her laptop, her robe cinched around her like she was queen of the house. Good news, she announced loudly, her smile gleaming. The notary will be here in 2 days. Finally. We'll have everything settled. Her mother clapped. Her cousins cheered. Even the children squealed. Daniel sat stiff in his chair, avoiding my eyes, pretending to study the screen of his phone. And me, I sat in the corner, quiet, my face composed. Inside, my chest burned with a fury so sharp it felt almost clean. That evening, I opened my blue notebook and wrote the most painful entry yet, Saturday with 3:45. Daniel confirmed willingness to sign papers declaring me incompetent. Betrayal complete, I closed the notebook with trembling hands, slid it into my suitcase, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the storm, rolling across the lake. They thought the battle was over. They thought I had been silenced, stripped of dignity, defeated. But they were wrong, because I still had my mind. I still had my evidence. I still had the truth. And when the time came, Sophie and Daniel would learn the one lesson I had left to teach them. Never underestimate the strength of a woman who has already lost everything once and lived to tell the tale. The Sunday after Daniel's confession, the lake house felt like enemy territory. Sophie strutted around in my robe as if she'd inherited it by divine right. Her relatives lounged in my chairs. Her children scribbled on my walls with markers, and my son avoided my gaze like a guilty child. But beneath the chaos, I was calm, because I finally understood I wasn't fighting for Daniel anymore. He had made his choice. He had chosen silence over truth, convenience over loyalty, weakness over courage. My fight was for myself, for my dignity, for my house, for the 30 years of sweat and sacrifice that had built it, and I would not lose. Step 1. Fortify the mind first. I had to protect the one thing Sophie was attacking most viciously, my mental capacity. On Monday morning, I drove into town under the excuse of buying groceries. Instead, I went straight to Dr. Melissa Grant, a psychiatrist recommended by my friend Tanya. Dr. Grant was professional, warm, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. I want a full evaluation, I told her. Cognitive tests, memory exams, everything you've got, and I want it documented. She raised an eyebrow. Most people resist these assessments. Most people don't have their children plotting to declare them incompetent, I replied evenly. The tests lasted 3 hours. Word recall, problem solving, orientation questions, even drawing clocks. I completed each task with a focus I hadn't felt in years. At the end, Dr. Grant smiled. Mrs. Mitchell, you're as sharp as a scalpel. I'll prepare a signed report confirming full mental competence, no signs of dementia or decline. I exhaled slowly. The first wall of defense was built. Step 2, build the case. Back at the house, I became a shadow. While Sophie barked orders and Daniel sulked, I collected evidence like a patient nurse charting symptoms. The nanny cam captured Sophie digging through my desk again, whispering on the phone, "Don't worry, Ethan. Once the notary comes, she'll have no way out." The recorder in my pocket caught Daniel saying, "Fine, I'll sign." His betrayal preserved forever in digital ink. Clara delivered bank receipts showing Ethan had been wiring Sophie small sums payment disguised as consulting fees. Each piece went into my blue notebook, each date meticulously logged. I also printed the photos of Sophie and Ethan together, tucking them into a sealed envelope. Not because I wanted to humiliate Daniel, but because I needed leverage. Step 3, secure the allies. No war is fought alone. At the bank, I met with Mr. Ellison, the manager who had overseen my accounts for 20 years. He greeted me with the same respect he always had. "I need safeguards," I told him. "Freeze my accounts from any third-party access. And I want a notarized statement confirming I manage all my finances independently." He didn't hesitate. "Of course. Mrs. Mitchell, we'll put extra protections in place. Only your signature will be valid." Next, I contacted attorney Susan Harpers, a family law specialist in the city. Her reputation was impeccable, her presence commanding. Sitting across from her mahogany desk, I laid out everything: documents, recordings, photos. When I finished, she leaned back, steepling her fingers. "Lorraine, your case is strong. Very strong. You have proof of attempted fraud, falsified medical reports, conspiracy, and even theft if we can show missing items. We can file for immediate protective orders." "And Sophie," I asked. "She has a lawyer." "Ethan Reynolds." Susan's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Ethan, oh, I know his reputation. More charm than integrity. If he's personally involved with Sophie, we can dismantle his credibility in court." Her confidence lit something inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt the scales of power shift. Step 4, set the trap back at the lake house. I played my role carefully. I let Sophie think she had won. I smiled politely when she spoke, nodded when she bragged, even thanked her when she called herself the one keeping this place alive. Meanwhile, I prepared my strike. On Tuesday morning, Sophie announced at breakfast, "The notary will be here tomorrow at noon. After that, Lorraine, you'll finally be free of all the burdens of this house." Her relatives clapped again, as if freedom from my own home was a blessing. I lifted my coffee cup, masking my smirk. How thoughtful. Sophie. I do appreciate how much you're looking out for me. Daniel glanced at me nervously, sensing something he couldn't name. That evening, when the house was quiet, I walked through each room like a general inspecting her battlefield. I touched the worn banister Daniel had once slid down as a child, the curtains I'd sewn by hand, the photo of Marcus and me on the mantel. This house was mine, not because the deed said so, but because every fiber of it carried my story. And tomorrow, I would defend it. Step 5. The quiet resolve. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk in the guest room, reviewing every piece of evidence. Clara's photos, Dr. Grant's report, Susan Harper's legal filings, the recordings, the appraisal with Sophie's handwriting, the false medical statement. All of it was ready. At dawn, I slipped the folder into my leather handbag, my armor, my weapon. When Sophie came down the stairs in her silk robe, yawning dramatically, I greeted her with a smile that was sharper than any blade. "Good morning, Sophie. I trust you're ready for the notary." She smirked. "More than ready." "Good," I said softly, holding her gaze. "So am I." Her smile faltered for just a moment, and that moment was all I needed. That day, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the burden Sophie had mocked, nor the frail widow they painted in false documents. I was Lorraine Mitchell, nurse, mother, builder, survivor. And tomorrow, when the notary arrived, Sophie would learn what it meant to underestimate me. Because my revenge wouldn't come with shouting, or fists, or tears. It would come with paper, signatures, and truth. The very weapons she had tried to use against me. The morning of the notary's visit, the lake house felt like a stage set for the final act of a play. Everyone was buzzing Sophie parading around in a tailored blazer she'd never worn before, her relatives scurrying like stagehands, and Daniel pacing nervously, his hands never leaving his pockets. To them, today was victory. To me, it was Justice Day. At exactly noon, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in a suit stepped out carrying a briefcase, the notary. Sophie practically skipped to the door to welcome him, her smile stretched too wide, rehearsed. "Come in." "Mr. Lawson," she said brightly. "We've been expecting you." The family gathered in the living room, as if about to watch history being written. The oak coffee table was cleared, a stack of papers neatly arranged on top. Sophie gestured for me to sit at the head of the table, a queen ushered to her throne, though we both knew she thought she was the one about to be crowned. "Lorraine," she purred, sliding the top document toward me. "All you have to do is sign here, and all the pressure of managing this big old place will be off your shoulders. Daniel and I will take care of everything." Isn't that a relief I didn't touch the pen? I looked around the room instead. Sophie's mother perched on the couch like a vulture. Her cousins whispered excitedly. The children ran in and out, oblivious. Daniel sat on the edge of a chair, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine. I let the silence stretch until Sophie's smile faltered. Then, finally, I spoke. "You're right, Sophie. It is time to settle everything, but we won't be signing your papers today, Dean." Confusion rippled across the room. Sophie laughed nervously. "Oh, Lorraine, don't be dramatic. The notary is here. The papers are ready. It's all just a formality." I opened my leather handbag and placed a thick folder on the table with deliberate care. "This," I said, tapping the folder, "is the only formality that matters today." The notary blinked, uncertain. "Ma'am," I turned to him. "Mr. Lawson, before you witness anything, you should know that the documents in front of you are fraudulent. They were prepared by an attorney who is not only romantically involved with my daughter-in-law, but who also fabricated medical reports claiming I suffer from dementia. The room erupted. Sophie jumped to her feet, her face red. That's a lie. She's confused. Don't listen to her, but I was already pulling out the evidence. One by one, I laid it on the table like cards in a winning hand. Dr. Grant's signed report declaring me fully competent. Photos of Sophie with Ethan Reynolds, her so-called lawyer. Bank receipts linking Ethan's payments to Sophie. The fake medical statement with the clinic's name and a $50 cash note. A flash drive containing the nanny cam footage and voice recordings. The notary's eyes widened as he skimmed the documents. Sophie's relatives shifted uncomfortably. Daniel's face drained of color. You see, I continued calmly, this entire scheme was an attempt to defraud me of my property. Under state law, that's elder financial abuse. And I have already filed a petition with my attorney, Susan Harper. By tomorrow morning, you'll be receiving notice of pending criminal charges. The silence was deafening. Then Sophie broke it, her voice shrill. She's making this up, Daniel. Tell them your mother's confused. I turned to my son, my eyes locked on his. Daniel, do you believe I'm confused? His mouth opened, but no words came. His hands shook in his pockets. I pressed on. Because I have you on tape, I have your voice saying, fine, I'll sign. Do you want me to play it for everyone here? Daniel's shoulders sagged as if the air had been knocked out of him. He buried his face in his hands. Sophie gaped at him. You told her, he whispered hoarsely. She knew everything. Sophie. She always knows. I rose from my chair, every eye on me. You called me a burden. Sophie, you thought my age made me weak. You thought you could take my life's work, my sanctuary, with a few signatures and a crooked lawyer. But you forgot one thing. I leaned forward, my voice steady as a stone. I built this house brick by brick. I survived loss, poverty, and 30 years of double shifts. You think I'd let a woman with no roots and no honor steal that from me? No, not today. Not ever. The notary closed his briefcase, his expression grim. I can't proceed with these documents. In fact, I'll be reporting this attempted fraud to the proper authorities. Panic spread across the room. Sophie's mother sputtered. This is unfair. We're family. I cut her off with a sharp look. Family doesn't forge medical reports. Family doesn't plot in secret. Family doesn't treat a mother as disposable. You chose greed over loyalty. You chose betrayal over love. Sophie lunged for the papers, but the notary stopped her. Ma'am, these are evidence now. Don't touch them. Her mask cracked then. The polished arrogance melted into raw fury. You'll regret this. Lorraine, you think you've won, but you haven't seen the last of me. I smiled coldly. On the contrary. Sophie, I think I've seen far too much of you already. Her relatives began gathering their things in tense silence. The children cried, sensing the storm but not understanding it. Daniel stood frozen, his head bowed, shame radiating off him. Before they left, I delivered the final blow. Daniel, I said, my voice softer, though no less firm, you betrayed me. But understand this, the house is no longer yours to covet. I've updated my will. This home will go to charity, not to you. If you wanted independence, you have it now. Permanently. His head jerked up, his eyes wide with panic. Mom, no, I held up a hand. You made your choice when you chose her lies over my truth. Sophie grabbed his arm, dragging him toward the door. Her face was twisted with rage, but beneath it, I saw fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of exposure. Fear of the empire she built on deception crumbling to dust. As the cars pulled out of the driveway, silence returned to the house. The kind of silence that feels like fresh air after a storm. I stood in the middle of the living room, my documents still spread across the table, and felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. Legal proceedings were still ahead. But the war was mine. Because Sophie had underestimated me. And Daniel had forgotten who raised him. And now, the whole world would know Lorraine Mitchell was no frail old woman. She was a survivor, a strategist, and above all, a woman who refused to be erased. The day Sophie and her family drove away from my lake house, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought the tears would come rushing out once the door slammed, once the sound of their cars faded into the trees. But instead, I sat in silence, my hands resting on the oak table, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, and felt something entirely different. Relief. For the first time in weeks, the air in my house was still. The walls didn't vibrate with someone else's music. My kitchen didn't reek of burnt food. My garden wasn't being trampled. It was just me and the steady sound of the lake against the shore. But relief was only the beginning. The real work, the work of reclaiming my dignity, my name, and my peace had only just begun. The aftermath. By Monday morning, Susan Harper had filed every motion we prepared charges of attempted fraud, a petition for restraining orders, and a report to the State Bar Association about Ethan Reynolds' misconduct. Within days, I got word back. The clinic that produced the fake dementia report was placed under state investigation, its license at risk. The doctor who signed the false papers was suspended indefinitely, Ethan Reynolds. Sophie's lawyer Loversna was summoned to a disciplinary board. Within weeks, he was stripped of his license to practice law, his career collapsing overnight. Sophie, dragged into court alongside him, faced charges of attempted elder financial abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud, both felonies, under Michigan law. And Daniel, my son, was named as a cooperating party. He wasn't jailed, but the judge ordered community service, restitution, and mandatory counseling. The word accomplice would follow him for years, stamped in every background check, every job application. It was one thing for Sophie to weave her webs, but for Daniel to step willingly into them, to sign away his mother's future. The court didn't care that he was my son. They cared that he was complicit. And that word complicit carried weight. The family fallout word travels fast in small towns. By the end of the week, whispers were everywhere about Sophie, about Daniel, about the scandal at the Mitchell Lake House. Her family, who once clapped and cheered for her victory, began distancing themselves, embarrassed to be tied to her disgrace. I knew because I saw it myself. One of her cousins, the loudest of them all, approached me at the grocery store. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell," she mumbled. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how far Sophie planned to take things." I didn't answer. Some apologies come too late. Daniel's letter, a month later, after the first court hearing, a letter arrived. Not a phone call, not a visit, a letter. "Mom," it began, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know what I did was wrong. Sophie convinced me this was for the kids, for our future. I see now how blind I was. I see how weak I was. I wish I had your strength. Maybe one day we can be a family again. If you'll let me, I'd like to come back not for the house, but for you. I'll wait for your answer." I read the letter 3 times. My heart clenched, because no matter how grown he was, Daniel would always be my boy. But sorry was easy after being caught. Sorry didn't erase betrayal. I folded the letter and placed it in my notebook, alongside every entry I had written, not as evidence this time, but as a reminder that even blood can betray, and that strength sometimes means letting go, reclaiming the house. Once the legal dust settled, I turned my attention to the house itself. The invasion had left scar stains on the carpet, scratches on the furniture, broken china. But I wasn't going to let their destruction linger. I hired a professional cleaning crew, replaced what was broken, repainted the walls. I planted new flowers in the garden, bright marigolds and tulips that stood defiant against the memory of trampling feet. The house bloomed again. And so did I. For years, I had been cautious, saving every penny, guarding every possession like a soldier at a gate. But now, I realized the real joy of building something wasn't in clinging to it. It was in living inside it fully, without fear. A new purpose. The betrayal had left me with a truth I couldn't ignore. My house would never be safe in the hands of those who didn't respect it. Daniel would never inherit it. I couldn't bear the thought. So, I rewrote my will. Instead of leaving the lake house to Daniel, I arranged for it to pass to a foundation that supported single mothers going through nursing school. Women like me, who needed a sanctuary, a chance to breathe and dream while they built futures for their children. If this house was built on sacrifice and survival, then it would continue to be a refuge for women who understood what it meant to fight. That decision brought me a peace no courtroom ever could. The quiet revenge. In the end, Sophie and Daniel were ordered to pay restitution for the legal fees and damages, tens of thousands of dollars that they didn't have. Their credit crumbled, their reputation followed, and their better future dissolved before their eyes. They lost far more than they could have gained by stealing from me. And that was the sweetest revenge of all, watching their empire of lies collapse under the weight of their own greed. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to hate. All I had to do was stand firm, tell the truth, and let justice do the rest. Reflection. 6 months later, I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, the lake glimmering under the evening sun. For the first time in years, I felt light. The house was mine again, not just on paper, but in spirit. Every corner held my history, and now it held my triumph too. I thought of Marcus, my late husband, and whispered to the air, I did it. Love? They tried to take it all, but I stood my ground. And I thought of Daniel, a son I loved, but no longer trusted. I folded the letter slowly. My heart ached. Forgiveness was a door I could unlock, but should I, some wounds heal with time. Others leave scars that can't be undone. For now, I chose silence. Let him wonder. Let him carry the weight. I had chosen dignity. The final message. People think aging makes you weaker. That being widowed, being 70, being past your prime makes you invisible. But I learned something through this storm. Age doesn't erase strength. It sharpens it. I wasn't just a mother or a widow. I wasn't just a nurse who saved for a house. I was a woman who built a life from scraps, who survived betrayal, and who proved that no one, not even family, had the right to decide my worth. And that's the message I carry now. The one I hope every woman hears: you are never too old to fight for yourself. You are never too tired to protect what's yours. And you are never, ever a burden. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't in destroying others. It's in rising stronger, freer, and unshakably yourself. Your turn. If you were Lorraine, would you forgive Daniel eventually or stand firm with your new boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice might guide another woman tonight. If this story touched you, hit like and share it with a friend who needs courage. For more cinematic dramas of family, betrayal, hidden truths, smart revenge, and healing, subscribe to Voice of Neva and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. We release new 60, 75-minute stories every week. Thank you for watching, for feeling, for reflecting. See you in the next story.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.